Tell me what you want to ask me the questions. I'll answer them the best way.
I'll move. I know what I'll do. I'll move this down a little bit, and then
Yeah, right.
I can get Jimmy in there.
Yeah, right.
And then.
Back in them days, Jimmy and I was the only black people in rock and roll. There's two people there. I got it. He confused me with him every time I'd be on the road with Led Zeppelin. They said, "You Jimi Hendrix?" I said, "No." They said, "Well, we want your autograph." I said, "Look, I'm not Jimi Hendrix. Give me your autograph anyway."
Yeah, tell. Wow, that's a great. That's great. That's a good story. That's a great way to start. You know.
No, I wouldn't start. I don't want to start like that.
No, well,
you start. You ask the questions and then I'll start.
Okay.
That's the best because you got you talking about Led Zeppelin most of the time, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, I think we talked before. I mean,
Yeah.
It was great to be able to meet you on the phone, and now to be able to come down here is really, it's terrific. I mean, and I just think, God, where would you want to start now? I mean, as far as like how did this your career?
Yeah, well, I'll just tell you what I did. First of all, I worked in the accounting department. When I was telling you I was working in accounting in Atlanta, I'll start like that if you want to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Bring us back to the beginning. I mean, you really had this.
When I first started in record,
you had a front row seat at the, this emergence.
And you got it running now?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look. First of all, I started working at Atlantic Records in 1965, like in May of 1965, as an accountant, a payroll clerk. I was payroll and accounts payable clerk to the controller. And being a payroll clerk, I paid all the sessions that they were. When the musicians recorded, I had to make up the checks to pay the sessions. You have a session, you pay the sessions, you pay it to the union, and the musicians get paid that way. So I got to know a lot of musicians by paying sessions, and then a lot of them want their checks up front, so you take the checks back, and they just sign for the checks, and you give them the check, and you can just pay the union dues directly to the union, and they don't have to go to the union to pick up the check. So I got to be friends with a lot of musicians that way, including Dwayne Allman and King Curtis, who did all of Aretha Franklin's. He was a band and played Aretha Franklin. And all these guys had recording contracts with Atlantic. King Curtis had an album with Atlantic. Dwayne Allman had the Allman Brothers later on, but he started out as a session musician. You used to call him Sky Dog,
Dwayne Allman was called Sky Dog? Or?
Yeah, back when he was doing sessions, Sky Dog. But these cats were like friends of mine. First of all, from being in the accounting department, that's how I got to know all these guys like Stephen Stills and Neil Young. I got to know them I knew them from when I was in the accounting department. Buffalo Springfield, when they first came to New York, I met Stephen and them back then. For what it was a big son. I was working in the accounting department then. But I would know all them because I was paying sessions, so I got to meet them and know them, and I liked the music, and we had like a lot in common. I'd go to the gigs at night after I get off, even though I had a suit and tie on. I'd go and hang out with these cats. And I remember one time I went to Undine's with Ahmet. And Otis Redding was playing the Apollo. I went to Undine's with Ahmet, so I went to Undine's to see Otis, and he was playing with the Buffalo Springfield was playing at Undine's, and Otis was going over there after Apollo. So me and Ahmet went over, and Otis was there as well, but he had been drinking a bit. So they asked him to get up and sing with them because Dewey, the drummer, was a fan of Otis, And so Otis got up and introduced him. Otis Redding. He was so tipsy that he bowed and passed out. Hit the floor, and then he got up. And after he got up, he played. He sang with him. It was a classic, man. One of the classic nights ever. But these cats were into R&B and all that stuff. Even though Crosby, Stills and Nash. I mean, it was before Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. It was just Neil Young, I think Bruce Palmer and Richie Fury. I think that's who it was in the band in Buffalo Springfield.
But you were an accountant. You were in like you were in the military, and then you went into.
Yeah, I was in the military before I started working as an accountant. When I got out of high school, I went to New York from Mississippi, and I stayed in New York like for 6 months. I went to NYU for one semester, and I couldn't pay. I couldn't continue to do it, so I decided to go in the Air Force in order to get a education, which you get a GI Bill. That's what I went in the Air Force for. So I went in the military, and I was in the military for 4 years. I went to Germany for 3 years. Spangdahlem Air Force Base, where all those is the same base they use now to go all those attacks that they go to Afghanistan, Iraq, whenever they were doing. That was one of the main tactical fighter planes. All the I guess F-35s they got now, whatever, F-1, whatever. I don't know what they have now.
Yeah.
But then it was F-100s, F-105s.
But you went, and so when you, after the military is when you went and got a job at the in accounting.
In accounting. I got a job working for a meat company down in all the way on 14th Street. It was in the Port Authority building called W.M. Tyner and Company. I got a job as a billing clerk, and I did that for about 3 years, from 62 I think till 65. At 65 I left there and I went to Atlantic. And what it was, I had a friend in Atlantic that was a girl from Sweden. She was a jazz fanatic, and I used to always call up because she could get her records. She'd get records free. She would get records for me. So one day she told me, "Say, like they got an opening in the bookkeeping department in Atlantic, in the bookkeeping department, and you can, if you want to interview, we can set you up for an interview." I said, "Yeah, good, because you get your records free. It's worth it, So I go there. I was making $110 a week, and I was making $110 a week at Tyner, so they offered me $110 plus the free records. That's like another $50 because I'm about to get free records every week. So that's why I took the job, And then from there, that's when I started paying. I was doing the payroll,
What was your first interact? I mean, so you pretty much started to see the musicians from jump, right?
Yeah, from the jump right away, because they come in to get a check. If you're going to get an advance, you had to come to get it from me, because I had to make the checks up. I made up all the checks. Every check that had to be made up at that time, I had to write it up by hand. It wasn't no fucking computer, So everything was, and payroll was done by hand. Everything was done by hand. I remember.
Was the Atlantic accounting department very big, or was it?
Yeah, it was big enough. Accounts payable and payroll was me. They had another guy that did, two people that did royalties, another person that did accounts receivable, the controller, then they had other people that do billing. But as far as accounts payable, that's the money that you're paying out. So I make up a check, they could be signed by Ahmed, Nestor, or Jerry, who owned the company. So I had to know them to deal with them, because I got to take the checks at them for them to sign them. So I got in on the ground floor of that, and also you understand the business. If you're in the accounting department, you understand the business. And the controller, I'm more or less the assistant to him, because he was like, I worked directly with him. And mostly I ended up being like an office manager. Whenever he wanted to fire somebody, he'd ask me to do it, and that was Sheldon Vogel.
You had to fire
Oh no, if he wanted to fire some secretary, he'd tell me to go tell him, because I'm the payroll guy. I got to give him that last check. So I said, well, look, I'm telling you now. I'll tell you now. Look, you're going to be fired on Friday. So if I was you, I'd start looking for a job. I would tell him up front. I'd start looking for a job now, because I give him a paycheck on a Wednesday or Thursday. You're going to be fired Friday. If I was you, I'd start looking for a job. You know what I'm saying?
Why? Did many people have that happen? Did they fire?
Back then, a lot of secretaries got fired, because they come in and out, and a lot of secretaries in and out. But it wasn't like in the accounting department, very few people got fired.